The camera pans slowly over the ruins of the Roman Forum. Broken marble columns cast long shadows under the evening sun. The air is heavy with silence, as if history itself is holding its breath. Suddenly, a voice breaks through, measured, steady, and filled with wisdom. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The words of Marcus Aurelius echo across the ruins. He was not just a ruler of men, but a ruler of himself. He commanded armies, yet he sought peace within. He governed the most powerful empire on earth, yet his greatest struggle was against his own doubts and fears. This is the story of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher, whose life and words continue to guide humanity nearly 2,000 years later. Part 1. The Philosopher Rises. Marcus Aurelius was born on April 26, 121 CE, into a Rome that stood at the height of its power. The empire stretched from the sands of Egypt to the cold frontiers of Britannia, from the rich markets of Syria to the wild forests of Germania. It was an age of prosperity, stability, and wealth. But beneath the glory of Rome's marble temples and mighty legions lay challenges that would test even the greatest of men. Into this world, a boy was born, one who would grow to embody both strength and humility. Marcus's birth name was Marcus Annius Verus. He came from a noble family with strong political connections. His grandfather, Marcus Annius Verus the Elder, was a powerful figure in the Senate, and his family enjoyed wealth and prestige. Yet from an early age, Marcus showed little interest in luxury or extravagance. While other children reveled in games or displays of wealth, Marcus preferred quiet reflection, study, and time spent in thought. Those close to him noticed his calm nature. He was reserved, but not cold, thoughtful, but not detached. In a society where ambition and pride often drove men to chase glory and power, Marcus seemed to walk another path, one guided by reason, duty, and humility. Education and early influence. In Rome, education was the foundation of leadership, and Marcus received the very best. He studied under the most respected tutors in philosophy, literature, and rhetoric. From a young age, he was drawn to Stoicism, the philosophy that taught self-control, endurance of hardship, and acceptance of fate. His first mentor in Stoicism was Julius Rusticus, a philosopher whose words would leave a deep impression on him. Rusticus introduced Marcus to the works of Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the greatest Stoic thinkers. Epictetus had taught that true freedom comes not from wealth or power, but from mastery of the mind. Marcus absorbed these teachings like water soaking into dry earth. He learned to remain calm in the face of anger, to accept suffering without complaint, and to remember that all glory, wealth, and fame are fleeting. As he grew, Marcus began to live the life of a Stoic. He dressed plainly, avoided indulgence, and practiced self-discipline. He would later write in his journal, known today as Meditations, that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. These reflections reveal the depth of his character, even in his youth, adopted into power. Marcus's life took a dramatic turn in 138 CE, when Emperor Hadrian, the adoptive father of Antoninus Pius, sought to secure the future of Rome's leadership. Hadrian had no surviving sons, and he believed stability could only be ensured through careful succession. Hadrian chose Antoninus Pius to be his heir, on one condition, that Antoninus adopt Marcus as his own son. At just 17 years old, Marcus was suddenly placed in direct line to the throne of the Roman Empire. It was a moment that could have inflated the ego of a lesser man. Overnight, Marcus went from noble youth to heir apparent of the mightiest empire on earth. Yet rather than celebrate, Marcus was humbled. He saw the weight of responsibility that had been placed upon him. To him, being emperor was not about privilege, it was about service. Antoninus Pius became more than a father figure to Marcus. He was a model of patience, justice, and stability. His reign was marked by peace, diplomacy, and careful governance. For over 2 decades, Marcus watched and learned from Antoninus, absorbing lessons in leadership, justice, and restraint. He came to see rulership not as a chance to dominate, but as a sacred duty. The young philosopher, even as he prepared for power, Marcus never abandoned his philosophical pursuits. He rose early to study, often before dawn, and spent hours reflecting on Stoic teachings. He practiced endurance by sleeping on a hard bed, and trained himself to face discomfort without complaint. Friends and tutors often warned him not to push himself too far. They saw how he avoided luxuries and lived with simplicity unusual for a young noble. But Marcus believed that by hardening his mind and body, he would be better prepared for the hardships of life and the responsibilities of leadership. In Meditations, he would later write, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." These words capture his lifelong awareness of mortality and his commitment to living each day with purpose, marriage and family. As Marcus grew older, duty required him to marry and secure alliances for Rome. In 145 CE, he wed Faustina the Younger, the daughter of Antoninus Pius. Their marriage was both political and personal, and though history records moments of strain, Marcus remained deeply devoted to her. They would have many children, though tragically, several died young, a painful reminder of the fragility of life, even for emperors. Family life was not easy for Marcus. While he sought wisdom and inner peace, he was constantly tested by personal loss and by the challenge of raising children who would inherit the empire. Among them was Commodus, a son whose future would become both a legacy and a curse. Preparing for power, by the time Antoninus Pius passed away in 161 CE, Marcus was ready. For years, he had studied, observed, and prepared himself for the burdens of leadership. Unlike many who sought the throne for glory or ambition, Marcus accepted it with reluctance, but also with a deep sense of duty. He did not seek to rule alone. He immediately named his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, as co-imperor, rare act of humility and cooperation. This decision revealed his character. He was not driven by greed for power, but by a desire to strengthen Rome through unity. The stage was now set for the next chapter of his life. As emperor, Marcus Aurelius would face challenges far greater than he had ever imagined. Plagues would devastate his people. Invasions would threaten Rome's very borders. Betrayals, hardships, and endless wars awaited him. And yet, through it all, Marcus would cling to philosophy not as an escape, but as a guiding light. He would discover that the wisdom he had cultivated since youth was not a luxury, but a necessity for survival. Part 2. Trials of an Emperor. The year was 161 CE. Rome had lost its steady hand, Emperor Antoninus Pius, and the weight of the empire now rested on the shoulders of Marcus Aurelius. For decades, Marcus had trained for this moment, not with ambition, but with discipline. He had studied philosophy, endured hardship, and prepared himself for a life of duty. Yet even he could not have foreseen the storm that was about to fall upon Rome. Shared rule with Marcus Aurelius, true to his sense of justice and humility, did not rule alone. He raised his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, Asco Imperor, remarkable decision in a world where power was jealously guarded. Together, they presented an image of unity. Marcus, calm and reflective, embodied the wisdom of a philosopher. Lucius, charismatic and bold, brought energy and military ambition. But while Marcus sought reason and moderation, Lucius was known for indulgence and excess. He enjoyed games, luxuries, and pleasures that Marcus avoided. Still, Marcus never condemned him. Instead, he worked alongside Lucius, respecting the partnership even when their temperaments differed. This shared rule would soon be tested by fire. Trouble was brewing in the east. Rome's ancient rival, the Parthian Empire, saw an opportunity to challenge Roman dominance. They invaded Armenia, a kingdom under Roman influence, and threatened to destabilize the eastern provinces. The Parthian War. In 162 CE, Lucius Verus was sent east to command Rome's legions against the Parthians. Though Marcus remained in Rome, he bore the greater responsibility, overseeing the empire, ensuring supplies, and maintaining stability at home. Lucius Verus may not have been a disciplined ruler, but under him, Rome's generals achieved great victories. The Roman legions pushed back the Parthians, captured their cities, and secured Armenia. In 166 CE, the campaign ended in triumph. Rome celebrated, but the victory carried a hidden curse. The returning soldiers brought with them a silent enemy, the Antonine Plague. The Antonine Plague. It began quietly, with fevers and coughs. Then it spread with terrifying speed. The disease ravaged cities, emptied villages, and cut through the legions like a scythe. Historians believe it was smallpox or measles, but whatever its nature, it was devastating. At its height, the Antonine Plague killed thousands every day. In the streets of Rome, pious burned constantly to dispose of the dead. Families were torn apart. Farmers abandoned their fields, leaving crops to wither. Trade collapsed. Even the mighty Roman army weakened, its strength drained, not by battle but by disease. Marcus Aurelius did not flee from the suffering. He remained in Rome, offering support to his people, funding relief efforts, and organizing aid. He opened the imperial treasury to help bury the dead and support survivors. He reminded his citizens, in words later preserved in Meditations, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." To Marcus, the plague was not only a disaster, but a test of Rome's resilience and of his own philosophy. Stoicism had prepared him to face hardship with calm, to accept what cannot be changed, and to act with virtue even in the face of despair. Yet fate was not finished testing him. War on the northern frontiers. While Rome struggled against plague, another threat rose in the north. Tribes along the Danube frontier, pressured by hunger and instability, began to raid Roman lands. The Marcomanni Quadi and other Germanic peoples sought new homes within the empire's borders. Their incursions grew bolder, threatening to break Rome's defenses. For the first time in centuries, Rome itself felt vulnerable. Barbarian forces advanced dangerously close to Italy, and panic spread among the population. The Senate feared disaster. Marcus Aurelius acted swiftly. Despite his lack of military passion, he took personal command of Rome's legions. He left the comfort of palaces and libraries to march with soldiers in the cold forests and harsh winters of the Danube frontier. He shared their hardships, slept in tents, and endured the same hunger and exhaustion. His presence inspired loyalty. To the men, Marcus was not only emperor, he was a comrade. The wars along the Danube would last for years, draining Rome's strength, but also forging Marcus into a wartime leader. These conflicts, known as the Marcomannic Wars, were brutal. Entire towns were destroyed, tens of thousands died. The empire's survival hung in the balance. Philosophy in the midst of war. It was during these long campaigns that Marcus Aurelius began writing what we now know as Meditations. By the light of campfires, surrounded by the noise of soldiers and the uncertainty of war, he turned inward. The words he wrote were not for others but for himself. Private journal, a guide to keep his soul steady amid chaos. He reminded himself to remain humble, to accept fate, to act with justice, and to treat even his enemies with respect. One passage captures his mindset. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Through his writings, we glimpse a man torn between duty and weariness, power and humility, war and philosophy. He never sought war, yet he accepted it as part of his fate. He never glorified violence, yet he fought because his people depended on him. Personal losses. As Marcus struggled with plague and war, his personal life was marked by tragedy. Several of his children died young, victims of the very disease devastating his empire. Though he rarely spoke of his grief, it weighed heavily upon him. In 169 CE, another blow struck. Lucius Varus, his co-emperor and brother, died suddenly, likely from the plague. Marcus was now sole ruler, carrying the full burden of empire on his shoulders. He did not waver. Alone, he pressed on, holding the empire together through sheer will and steadfastness. But every victory came at a cost, a vision of Rome. Despite these hardships, Marcus never lost sight of his duty. He dreamed of securing the frontiers and bringing stability to the provinces. He envisioned creating new provinces beyond the Danube, settling barbarian tribes under Roman law, and extending Rome's order into the wildlands of the north. But the constant wars, the drain of resources, and the relentless plague made his vision difficult to achieve. Every time victory seemed near, new crises arose. In the end, Marcus was not remembered as a conqueror, but as a guardian. He preserved the empire through some of its darkest days. He fought not for glory but for survival. His legacy was not measured in lands gained, but in strength endured. The shadow of Commodus, among Marcus' greatest concerns, was the future of Rome after his death. His beloved wife Faustina died in 175 CE, leaving him in sorrow. His surviving son, Commodus, would one day inherit the throne. Marcus 1. Part 3. The final years of a philosopher king. The later years of Marcus Aurelius were marked by struggle, loss, and endurance. For decades he had carried the burdens of an empire, defending Rome against invasion while fighting the slow decline of his own health. He was no longer the young man who had once walked the marble halls of Rome with quiet hope. He was now a weary emperor, tested by war and grief, yet still devoted to his duty. The northern frontier became his second home. While others ruled from palaces, Marcus lived for years in military camps, surrounded by soldiers who shared his hardships. He marched through forests, endured freezing winters, and faced hunger and disease alongside them. The emperor did not demand respect through fear or grandeur. He earned it by being present, by showing that even the most powerful man in Rome was not above sacrifice. Yet danger came not only from outside. In 175 CE, when false rumors of his death spread, the general Avidius Cassius declared himself emperor. For a moment, civil war threatened to engulf Rome, but the rebellion collapsed when Cassius was killed by his own men. Marcus did not celebrate the death of his rival. Instead, he mourned. He wished mercy for Cassius' family, forgiveness for those who had followed him, and lamented that Rome had come so close to tearing itself apart again. This reaction revealed his nature. Where others would have demanded vengeance, Marcus sought compassion. Not long after, tragedy struck his personal life. His wife, Faustina, died during their travels. She had been his partner in both family and rule, the mother of his children, and a steady presence in his turbulent reign. Ancient voices debated her character, but Marcus' devotion to her memory never faltered. He honored her with monuments and divine status, but within himself he must have felt profound loneliness. His writings from these years often return to the themes of death, impermanence, and love lost. To him, loss was not destruction but change, a part of nature's eternal cycle. Still, he carried the weight of sorrow in silence. The wars on the frontier dragged on. Victory was within reach, but Rome was exhausted. The plague continued to weaken the empire, draining its people and resources. Marcus pressed forward, determined to secure Rome's borders for the future. In this time, he brought his young son Commodus into power, raising him as Emperor. It was a decision born not of confidence but of necessity. Commodus was far from his father in temperament, more drawn to spectacle and ease than to philosophy or duty. Yet Marcus could only hope that time and example would guide his son. He prepared him for rule, knowing that the empire's survival would soon rest upon his shoulders. By the year 180 CE, Marcus's body began to fail. Decades of war, illness and grief had left him frail. In a military camp along the Danube River, far from the comforts of Rome, he fell ill. Surrounded by his soldiers, he faced death as he had faced life, with calm acceptance. He is remembered as saying, "Go to the rising sun, for I am already setting." On March 17, 180 CE, Marcus Aurelius died. With his death, an age ended. Many saw him as the last of the 5 good emperors, the final ruler of Rome's golden era. His son Commodus inherited the empire, but his rule would undo much of what his father had preserved. Where Marcus embodied restraint, Commodus sought indulgence. Where Marcus lived for duty, Commodus lived for spectacle. The contrast between them only magnified the wisdom and dignity of the father. Yet Marcus Aurelius' true legacy was not in military victories or political reforms, but in his thoughts. His meditations, written in moments of solitude, were never meant for the world, and yet they survived, carrying his voice across centuries. In them, he speaks of patience, humility, and the acceptance of fate. He reminds us that power, wealth, and even life itself are fragile. What endures is virtue, the strength to remain just even when surrounded by injustice. In the end, Marcus Aurelius was not remembered only as an emperor. He was remembered as a man who struggled, who suffered, who lost, but who never surrendered to bitterness or despair. His reign was a storm, but through it he held fast to the calm within himself. That calm was his greatest victory. The story of Marcus Aurelius is not simply the story of Rome. It is the story of a human being who faced the same trials we all face: loss, pain, betrayal, and the certainty of death. He bore them not as a conqueror, but as a student of life. He taught that no matter what we endure, we still have the power to choose how we live, how we act, and how we treat others. Empires fall, marble crumbles, statues turn to dust, but the words of Marcus Aurelius endure. They whisper to us across time, urging us to live with integrity, to waste no time on anger or vanity, and to face death not with fear, but with acceptance. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." These were not just words, they were the way he lived. And so, long after the empire he guarded has vanished, his wisdom remains. The philosopher king is gone, but his voice still speaks. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one.